Glad you're here, and I think you will be too. I'm Susan McKnight. I'm on the Hannah's House board, and we're pairing up with the Comm Center tonight, and we're just so glad that you're here. Hannah's House, for those of you who don't know, can read on the screen. We promote mental health for people of all ages, mostly all ages. We have an office in Waitsfield and we have an office in Waterbury. Many people don't know that we have a Waterbury presence. And we would like to get better acquainted with Waterbury because a number of our clients come from Waterbury and a lot of our outreach programs are in Waterbury. So we hope that you'll be seeing more of us there. We are delighted tonight to have Corey Bourne with us. I knew nothing about the Comm Center, and I'm looking forward to learning about their mission and the people they help, who are most likely people we all know. So thank you for being here. If you would please turn off your phones, that would be excellent. And just so you know, we are taping this for MRTV. Is everybody comfortable with that? And it will be shown on that station, and it will also be available on the Comm Center website and the Hannah's House website. So if you know of other people who couldn't be here tonight, they will be able to access this talk. Thanks again and welcome.
Thank you for the introduction.
Please turn off your phone.
Oh gosh, that's hysterical. Okay. Oh my God.
Hysterical.
This feels so oddly formal for such a small group of people who I mostly know. So I'm going to be a little bit more casual, but I'm really excited to talk about this. Diet culture, social media, and body image. They're all really linked and interconnected. And I know that most of you are parents, and it really impacts adolescents in a major way. And we'll get into it. I'll just start. I'm going to be back and forth the whole time. But here's what we'll go through. I'll introduce the Comm Center. Thank you for that beautiful introduction of Hannah's House too, Susan. That was wonderful. I'll talk about what diet culture is with a really in-depth definition, not my own, someone else's, and it's amazing. We'll talk about what even an eating disorder is. Some of you probably have an idea already, but I'll go into the nuance of the different eating disorders and how they impact people's lives. We'll talk about how it all connects. We'll talk a lot about social media, how to spot diet culture on social media, because it is tricky. A lot of places that promote or say that they promote wellness or say that they promote a healthy lifestyle are actually promoting diets or disordered eating. So I'll teach you a little bit about how to spot that and then give you some exceptional alternatives on particularly Instagram, because that's where I kind of live. I'm not super well versed in TikTok. It feels too young for me, but Instagram has a wealth of knowledge for ways to build your own resilience and also learn ways to help other people build resilience for body image too. And then we'll talk a little bit about what do we do? How do we build that body image resilience? What to say, what not to say. And then there will be time for questions. But this works so much better if it's truly a workshop. I know I'm standing in front of you, you're sitting facing me with slides, but if you have questions, please interrupt me. I'm also a chronic fast talker, so if I'm going too fast, please stop me. I won't be offended, I need it, because I just go sometimes, especially about this. I'm incredibly passionate about this work, so I will just ramble if I'm not stopped, so please stop. I want to acknowledge before we get any further that this is a really touchy subject. Eating disorders and disordered eating, dieting, all of these things impact people in so many ways, and it can be really hard to hear talks about eating disorders, and it can be incredibly triggering, so please take care of yourself. I won't be offended if you have to get up and walk out of the room, whatever the reason is, whether it's because you're upset or because you get a call, do your thing. Take care of yourself. That's my biggest advice. No matter how far you get into your own journey, understanding your relationship to your body and your relationship to food, sometimes things can still be tricky and upsetting to hear. So just go into this, be gentle with yourself, and take care of yourself throughout the whole presentation. A little bit about the Comm Center. The Comm Center for Eating Disorders is the only higher level of care eating disorder treatment center in Vermont. Outside of the Comm Center, patients can find outpatient care with dietitians and nutritionists and therapists and primary care physicians. but there's no structured programming for eating disorders aside from the Comm Center, which great that we exist, and there's still so much work to be done. We offer PHP and IOP eating disorder treatment programs, which are not residential. Patients go home at the end of the day. It's all in person. I can talk more about that later. But aside from offering a higher level of care for people who are struggling with an eating disorder, we feel really passionately about educating people about eating disorders, body image, all the things that could lead to an eating disorder, and also information about the resources that are available. I come from education, so education is a huge, important piece of my life, so I feel really strongly about teaching people things that can help them, stop the progression of an eating disorder for themselves or someone else, and also find the care that they need, and also just be aware of, again, where these things show up in their lives. We did that. And why am I here? I think it's pretty obvious. It's really important to call these things out. We were just talking briefly about how, back in our day in high school, we never talked about these things. We never talked about eating disorders. We never talked about how we feel about our bodies. Social media was not a thing. So I think it's really important to bring more awareness to eating disorders, disordered eating, body image, how we relate to food, all of that, because there's still such a social taboo around it, and so much of what the eating disorder generally wants someone to do is also in alignment with the dominant culture, which is diet culture. So I think that calling that out and stopping that from being the norm is really important, because it can also help prevent eating disorders in the long run. It can help people be more aware, and it can help people feel less shame in seeking help when they need it. So, what is body image? You probably have ideas. There's probably more that's not listed up here too, and I'd love to hear if there's anything you'd add. It's a person's subjective picture or mental image of their body. Body image doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what you see in a mirror, what you see in a picture of yourself. It's subjective and it's internal. It can fluctuate greatly from day to day or hour to hour, even minute to minute. It's dependent on lots of different factors. It's not purely related to physically what you see. It also has to do with how you feel about what you see. So all of that is kind of interconnected when you think about your body's image. And again, it's internal and external. Body image can be impacted by what kind of day you're having, how you've eaten, how you feel about what you've eaten, what someone has said about what they've eaten, what someone has said about you, what you've eaten. It goes on, and it can even be impacted by things completely unrelated to food and body. Your body image can be related by impacted by your mood. Can be impacted by, other triggers and stressors in your life. If you have a trauma history, your body image can be even more disjointed, with the long-term goal being in tune with your body and being more interoceptively aware, meaning aware of how your body feels without touching your body. You can be aware, in tune of how it feels. That's the goal. That can be disrupted when there's a trauma history. Body image is really just a subjective feeling of how you feel about your body's image. Any questions about that? It's kind of nebulous, kind of vague. This is one representative of body image as a spectrum. I have mixed feelings about this, but I'll let you soak it in for just a second. At the far end of the spectrum, we have body hate, then into body respect, body acceptance, body appreciation, body peace, body confidence, and body liberation, which is more of an approach aligned with radical self-love. If any of you are familiar with Sonia Renee Taylor, who takes the work of radically loving yourself as an act socially to help dismantle stigma and break down barriers that people face for things not related to their body's size, such as race, age, gender, so on and so forth. So a lot of people like to paint this as the body image spectrum, and when I saw this, I thought, okay, well, naturally, if I'm over here in body hate land, then eventually I will get to the point where I feel some respect for my body. And after enough time feeling respect for my body, being able to acknowledge what it does for me, being able to acknowledge how it functions, that I'm able-bodied, that I'm able to, learn and stand up and go and see my friends or play a sport or, whatever it is, develop that respect, then I'll be able to accept the way it looks, despite any kind of past harbored hatred. And if I'm able to accept it, maybe I can start to appreciate it. And if I'm able to appreciate it, maybe I can find some peace in my body, or as a lot of patients say at the Comm Center, be in a state of truce with your body image and just feel that peace. And then maybe if I feel peace, maybe I can learn to like it enough to be confident in my body. And then once I feel confident in my body and I've really moved so far past this hate, once I'm confident, maybe I can take this work that I've done for myself and let it trickle out to other people and experience body liberation, which means attacking the systems that make people in bigger bodies feel vilified, or questioning systems that uphold diet culture. So when I see the spectrum, I'm led to believe that it will be a straight line, but in reality, it's more like that. So you'll bounce all over the place. It is not linear in any way. And even within a day, a minute, an hour, you'll be all over the place on the spectrum. We actually did a really interesting activity with the patients at the Comm Center, having them reimagine this a while back. And the amount of nuance that is available when you think about how you feel about your body and your body image can't be quantified into something like this, because it's so subjective and it's so impacted by so many things. And based on like the nods and the response to this, I can imagine that maybe you feel a similar way, that it's really not linear and you can really bop around and maybe you feel something in the middle that's not named up there, and that's all valid. And as I'll talk about in a little bit, diet culture really wants you to be so motivated by body hate that you will do anything in your power to change your body. And that is what I'm here to say, no, don't do that. It's not in your best interest, even if diet culture says it is. Any questions about this? I'm going to jump kind of aggressively to eating disorders. I promise it will all connect. I imagine you know that already. An eating disorder is a mental condition that's characterized by a disturbance in eating behavior. I'm going to say that again, it is a mental condition. A lot of people have a misconception that an eating disorder is strictly physical, and while it is characterized by these physical behaviors, it's a mental health condition that manifests physically. So that's something I always like to keep in mind. Way back when I struggled with my own eating disorder, I had a really hard time wrapping my logical brain around that and understanding that it was actually the thought patterns that I needed to address to be able to work through the behavioral patterns. And that's the work of eating disorder treatment or care with someone helping someone through an eating disorder, is addressing the thoughts and the behaviors, but knowing that it stems from a mental health condition. The results are vast. Eating disorders affect all aspects of a person's life, physical and mental. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment, all of the effects of an eating disorder. And it can be caused by genetics, environment, or a combination of the two. There's research all over the place in all different directions saying that eating disorders are heritable. People can inherit genes that make them more likely to develop an eating disorder. There's a lot of studies that say that it's purely environmental. So growing up in Western culture where diet culture is the norm, people will be more likely to develop an eating disorder as a result of dieting. And then there's also research saying that it's a combination of the two. So if someone has a perfectionistic gene, if they're a perfectionist by just in their traits, and they've grown up in diet culture, there's a higher likelihood that they may develop an eating disorder. It's not guaranteed, but there is a likelihood. Those are some of the things that can lead to eating disorders. But the causes are, there's more than I could possibly name. And there's a fly. There are just so many reasons why someone might develop an eating disorder. And I also want to emphasize that it's never a choice. Eating disorders are a coping mechanism. It's not something that someone is choosing because they want an eating disorder. It's not something that someone is choosing for vanity purposes. It's a mental health condition through and through. I want to briefly go through just some common eating disorders. Can you show me on your fingers how many of these have you heard of?
What did you say?
Show me on your fingers how many of these you've heard of. Yeah, okay. Thank you, all over the place. Okay, so you've all heard of at least one of these. Amazing. I'd be willing to bet it was anorexia. That's the eating disorder that's most commonly discussed. It's characterized by a restriction of intake. There's lots of different subtypes in anorexia nervosa. There's a restrictive subtype, there's a restrict-purge subtype. A lot of nuance to all of these eating disorders. I won't go into all of them because we'd literally be here all night. But anorexia is the most common eating disorder because it's the one that stereotypically and falsely is most aligned with diet culture's goal for people, which is to lose weight. The truth about anorexia is most people who have traits of anorexia are not in smaller bodies. They have atypical anorexia, which is technically a category of OSFED, which I'll get to in a moment. So ultimately, anorexia, while it might be the most commonly talked about, it's not nearly the most common eating disorder. Bulimia is characterized by out-of-control eating, otherwise known as binging, as well as compensatory behaviors. Those compensatory behaviors can include, but are not limited to, self-induced vomiting, compulsive exercise, laxative use, so on and so forth. Pretty much anything used to, quote unquote, make up for the binge, and then it's just a vicious cycle. Almost always preempted by restrictive eating at some point. Binge eating disorder is similar to bulimia in that the patient or person or client or friend, I don't know, however you want to categorize who you're thinking about, is characterized by this out-of-control eating or binging without the compensatory behavior, and that is the most common eating disorder, is binge eating disorder. Something that's really interesting about binge eating disorder, and I've noticed this, yes, in my work at the Comp Center, but when I work with people as an intuitive eating counselor, people who struggle with binge eating or have in the past, it's almost always preceded by a long period of restriction. So I think it doesn't do it justice when you think about binge eating disorder to just take just the binge behavior into consideration. It's almost always preceded by restricting your intake, either all day or all night, so that when you finally eat, it's out of control, completely out of control. ARFID is something that we're seeing an uptick in, and it's also like a little bit more in the zeitgeist. People are really talking about ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. People with ARFID eat a really limited number of safe foods, leading them to restrict everything else. I want to be really clear that this isn't just being a picky eater. Kids don't want to eat vegetables that are green, or some adults also don't want to eat vegetables that are green. That's like not a problem. But being someone with ARFID means that you are someone with such an aversion to these fear foods, whether it's for their color, their texture, their smell, fear of choking. All of these things can lead to such an obsession and a preoccupation with avoiding these foods that the number of safe foods can be limited to so few that a person's physical health is impacted as a result. Often with ARFID, there's no body image concern component, often but not all the time. People with ARFID can still have body image concerns, but often that part is missing. It's really a result of the aversion to fear foods. OSFED, or other specified feeding and eating disorder, is kind of a catch-all diagnosis. It used to be known as EDNOS, eating disorder not otherwise specified. And this is a catch-all for people that may fit the criteria for any other eating disorder, but don't meet the weight criteria, don't meet the frequency criteria for a certain behavior. There are some other nuanced eating disorder diagnoses, such as night feeding syndrome, atypical anorexia as an OSFED diagnosis, purging disorder as an OSFED diagnosis. So it's pretty much, like I said, the fly is crazy, right? I know, it's coming for all of us. OSFED really is a catch-all. It's a DSM-5 diagnosis that unfortunately colloquially doesn't carry the same weight as anorexia or bulimia or even binge eating disorder does, but it's just as serious. We see a lot of patients with OSFED, and there are a lot of people with OSFED who maybe don't feel like they're being taken seriously because they don't meet the BMI criteria for anorexia nervosa, or because they're not binging and purging as often as the bulimia nervosa diagnosis warrants. But it's still just as dangerous and just as valid a diagnosis. Last but not least is orthorexia. It's not technically a diagnosable eating disorder in the DSM-5, but it's so sneaky. Orthorexia is like eating healthy, exercising healthy to the nth degree, where it controls a person's life. It's like trying to eat a raw diet or eat a clean diet, or going to the gym past the point of exhaustion. It's an obsession with healthy eating and movement that oftentimes develops into another eating disorder. Usually with restriction, a lot of limited safe foods, a lot of compulsive exercise. It looks different for everyone though. And I like to point it out because a lot of things that we see in social media, that we see in the news, that we see that are like those what I eat in a day videos, or like when celebrities talk about their like diet and exercise routines, it's very orthorexic and it frightens me. And I just want you to like raise a little flag in your head when you hear anyone talking about what they're eating. If there's a limited like kind of food that they're eating, if there's a limited way that they're moving their body that seems like maybe more extreme than normal, just be curious. Even though it's not diagnosable, it's still something that's really common. And
that
also
would be like being obsessed about protein be an example? of
absolutely,
that? Okay.
yes, being obsessed with protein. There's a not a non-diagnosis diagnosis that's kind of being talked about now. It's bigorexia. So typically cis men wanting to bulk up and get as big and muscular and defined as possible. That kind of isn't in line with orthorexia, yeah. Also not mentioned, drunkorexia, restricting your intake to save, again in air quotes, big time, save your calories for alcohol. Really dangerous for lots of reasons. There's no food in the body to absorb it. It's just bad. There's lots more iterations, but I'll leave it there. Any questions about these?
This is all true for like male and female.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, in popular culture, we hear about eating disorders as like a thin, young, cis white woman from a wealthy family who has the means to get specialized care for an eating disorder, when in reality, it's everyone. Increasingly more among men, increasingly more amongst the queer community, increasingly more amongst people facing poverty, and like who do you think is getting care? Certainly not the people that need it in those populations, right? Especially when care is often tailored toward what people think of as an eating disorder, which is a shame, but I appreciate you bringing that up. I talked a little bit about how eating disorders impact everything. They really do. Mentally, eating disorders often come with obsessive thoughts about food, body image, what to eat, when to eat, where am I eating, who am I eating with, what is the option, how is it cooked, when will I eat next, when will I be able to move my body, how will that food make my body look, how do I look right now, do I look the way that they think I look, or do they see me how I see myself, is this true, what if I eat this, will I look better, will they like me more? That's just like a snippet of the ongoing inner dialogue of someone with an eating disorder, or can be. Physically, eating disorders impact all the body systems, every single one, every eating disorder. Not just anorexia, not just bulimia, binge eating disorder, orthorexia, ARFID, they all impact all body systems, and it's a really negative effect. Also, I want to highlight that weight can fluctuate up or down regardless of diagnosis. People with eating disorders don't only lose weight. Some people with eating disorders gain weight. Some people stay the same. It might be undetectable. Some people's bodies change in ways that don't impact their weight, but impact their health still. Huge physical impact, but I feel like that's probably the most obvious impact of eating disorders, maybe, other than mental. Emotionally, eating disorders, I'm sure you can imagine, cause a huge amount of emotional distress. Not just for the people that are struggling, also for their loved ones, right? A lot of concern for people with eating disorders can also come from, am I hiding my eating disorder well enough? And that can also lead to a lot of guilt and shame. Eating disorders like thrive in secrecy, they thrive in that shame, which has a huge impact on a person's emotional state, really also their self-esteem, how they view themselves, how they feel about themselves as a person, and their overall mood. And socially, eating disorders lead to withdrawal, isolation, avoiding food-focused events. That's one of the earlier giveaways that someone might be struggling with an eating disorder. They're just not there. They're not present. They're withdrawing. And that, again, can lead to a whole host of other impacts socially within their family, with their friends, with their partner, whatever it is. I feel like such a downer every time I talk about those, but it's important to recognize that, you know, it's not just the mental and physical that are impacted. So as I'm sure you can imagine, eating disorders have a huge connection to body image. Negative body image is actually a predictive factor for someone developing an eating disorder. So if someone is experiencing negative body image, negative self-perception, they're more likely to develop an eating disorder. They're often co-occurring with body dysmorphia, which is a distorted view of how someone sees themselves. Body dysmorphia is like looking in the mirror and seeing something completely different, not even gently shifted, just completely different from what is true about their body, not understanding how they actually look. And it's usually a grotesque version of their body, completely falsified by the eating disorder. Also, malnourishment can really negatively impact how someone sees themselves. If someone's not eating enough, they're not thinking clearly. If they're not thinking clearly, they're probably having a lot of untrue thoughts, a lot of critical self-thought, and a lot of, just untrue things going through their heads about how their body looks and how they feel and how other people see them. And that can also really skew how much that matters. Body dysmorphia can make it feel like how you look is the most important thing in the world, when really, it's who you are matters. Cheesy as it is, but body dysmorphia will tell you the only thing people care about is how you look. The only thing people like you for is your body. It's really harsh. All of this is really intertwined, and body image work is some of the hardest work in eating disorder recovery, because you can teach someone to eat according to a meal plan and properly nourish themselves. You can teach someone different emotional regulation skills to help combat some eating disorder thoughts. But body image is something that you have to sit with when no one else is there all the time. Like, you're always with yourself. So it can be really, really hard to kind of counteract negative body image with an eating disorder, but it's not impossible. There's a lot of different approaches that therapeutic teams can take to help people become more comfortable with their body and kind of go through that insane, not linear trajectory of body image. But it is a lot of work, and it's work that is often really challenging for people with an eating disorder. So, I told you I was going to define diet culture with not my words, because I could have never said it as good as Christy Harrison did. I don't know if any of you are familiar with her. Christy Harrison is incredible. She's an intuitive eating counselor. Yes, someone familiar with Christy Harrison?
Yeah, I read the book.
Oh, so good! I'm so happy to hear that.
And her podcast is great.
So good, right? It's my favorite resource. So good. Okay, you said it. It's amazing. So Anti-Diet, Reclaim Your Time, Money, Well-Being, and Happiness Through Intuitive Eating by Christy Harrison is amazing. This book I read many years after I had gone through treatment for an eating disorder, and it made me realize how many eating disorder thoughts and behaviors I was still holding on to that weren't like overt eating disorder things, but I was like, oh my God, this is all steeped in diet culture. Oh my God, it's everywhere. I would highly recommend reading this. Pick up a copy, 10 out of 10. Her podcast, also incredible. It's called Food Psych. I would recommend that. All kinds of topics related to food, body image, movement, in the eating disorder and disordered eating world. But she defines diet culture in 4 very wordy bullets. So I'll read them to you, but I want to give you time to process them and ask questions. If you have them, no pressure. But Christy Harrison defines diet culture as a culture that worships thinness and equates it to health and moral virtue, which means you can spend your whole life thinking you're irreparably broken just because you don't look like the impossibly thin ideal. It promotes weight loss as a means of attaining higher status, which means you feel compelled to spend a massive amount of time, energy, and money trying to shrink your body, even though the research is very clear that almost no one can sustain intentional weight loss for more than a few years. The statistic that she quotes is like 95% of people gain all the weight back and more. She also likes to constantly remind people in her book and in her podcast that weight cycling, or yo-yo dieting as some people call it, your weight goes up and down, is more harmful to your health than staying at a higher body weight. So this is part 1 of what is diet culture. I could not fit this all on one slide. I tried. Diet culture demonizes certain ways of eating while elevating others, which means that you're forced to be hypervigilant about your eating, ashamed of making certain food choices, and distracted from your pleasure, your purpose, and your power. And diet culture oppresses people who don't match up with this supposed picture of health, which disproportionately harms women, femmes, trans folks, people in larger bodies, people of color, and people with disabilities, damaging both their mental and physical health. That's a lot. Anyone have thoughts or questions on this big old definition of diet culture?
I think it's so much more than this.
Yeah.
Believe it or not. But
Yeah.
I think as parents, and probably everyone's here as a parent, it has a lot to do with how we feed our children too. That there's moral virtue in feeding them a certain way and not allowing them to eat other foods. And I think protein's the latest obsession, but in the 80s it was everything was fat free, that everything was carb free, and then we became obsessed with sugar.
Yeah.
People are still obsessed with sugar.
Yeah.
But in the end, I think it's just the question of, is whatever you're doing, whether it's clean eating, healthy eating, whatever you call it, would you do it if it made you gain 15 pounds or your kids gain 15 pounds? If the answer is no, it's probably somewhere around diet culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's not talked about enough to think about, like, diet culture might impact you as an individual, but then it also impacts you and how you deal with your family, and how you deal with your friends, and then how you worry about someone else's perception. Am I feeding my family good enough? If there's a hierarchy about how we eat and how we look, where do I line up? It's really messed up. It's like really, I get really like, my body gets warm because I get really angry thinking about diet culture, because I think about, my mom dieted her entire life. And that was what I was raised to believe was how I should live my life. And if I had had words for what diet culture is in the 90s, and I was able to call that out, I like to think that I would have been totally different, but I don't know, like, how much can one person saying, Mom, maybe don't do that, how much can that really rock the boat? It really is systemic. And it feels really daunting, but I don't want that to discourage you when you think about, examining diet culture, thinking about where it shows up in your life, and how you reflect on how you interact with other people, how you think about yourself. Any other thoughts about this?
Well, I think it's really interesting because it sounds like it can be very egoic or more literal, this culture. So when you first started talking about it, I thought you meant like the environment that we're placing ourselves in. But it can truly be self-driven and within a micro space. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, diet culture can show up within your own mind, just right there. And if it's just showing up there for you, I would be willing to bet it's also, like Chrissy Harrison says, it's the water we all swim in, we're just blind to it. It's there, maybe not called out, but it's all around. So it comes from somewhere. I don't think anyone is organically thinking this way. I think it comes from a culture at large that encourages us to think this way. She also says we're born intuitive eaters, and then diet culture gets in the way and changes that, which I fully believe to be true. She's on one. She's great. She also has, I'm sure you've listened, but for anyone else, she has episodes of Food Psych talking about feeding a family through diet culture, like with an awareness of diet culture. She's Cat's Pajamas, that one.
I just hate the word diet.
Yeah.
Like, I look at it and I see Diet Coke. I hate Diet Coke. I hate what it does to people, but I just hate that word. Like, I'm like, why do you just say it differently? You're making better choices for, myself and my family. Diet just to me seems like so, I think of Diet Coke. I don't know why, and I just don't like that association. Yeah.
But I think the problem is that it's more insidious now because the diet industry and diet culture recognizes that we are smart and we're like, oh, diets don't work. I'm not going to take my kids to Weight Watchers, but I am going to have them eat clean. I'm only going to feed them organic produce. And, I think especially in Vermont, I lived in Boston until 8 years ago. And I would say here, it really hides itself as more of orthorexia. We've got to get outside, we've got to hike, we've got to bike, like no one ever sits around and knits.
They might.
Or they do, it better not be sunny outside.
Yeah.
No, but I just think like we don't call it a diet anymore, we call it clean eating, or we call it,
Wellness.
Yeah, or balance, or whatever. But it's sneaky because in the end, what's it really about? It's about the way your body looks on the outside.
Yep.
Which is why I think the question of like, is this for boys and everybody too? Yeah. But initially, I do think that there was a huge sexism component. It's like internalized sexism because women were supposed to be smaller and not seen as much and not big and loud.
Yep.
So, you know, you better spend all your time, money, and energy getting skinny
Yeah.
so you don't run for president.
Thank you for that. I think, no, it's okay. No, I appreciate it. It's really helpful too, because I can only hear my own voice for so long before I feel like I'm gonna snap. But I appreciate that. Also, when I think about what you like, you have this averse reaction to the word diet. It's been so vilified. Like, what you eat is your diet. Like, what, no matter what it is. Like, we all have a diet, you know. And to your point too, people aren't calling it diets anymore. They're calling it a lifestyle change. They're calling it wellness.
I
It's
think that
shocking.
those things have definitions though. Like if we called it like your nutritional culture, right, then it would take a different perception, I believe, right? Because wellness culture has a definition as well, which doesn't directly, like one component of it is food. I'm curious, I'm looking forward to learning if you also talk a little bit about the direction that our culture is going marketing-wise, because for so long it was what you were saying, and now marketing-wise, it's bringing back images of obesogenic culture, right, and normalizing that. And then the clinical world is reminding us that that isn't necessarily the healthy choice for your body. So like you said, normalizing our weight or being at a heavier weight for a longer period of time opposed to yo-yo dieting is clinically better for us, for our bodies, right? But the imaging is going back to obesogenic cultures being normalized, and that's not clinically healthier, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting, like in the clinical world, that's a big argument because right now heart disease is one of our largest killers, right? Which is greatly influenced by how you eat. So it's interesting, I think, to dive down into like what diet culture specifically is, because it isn't necessarily, what I'm hearing is, it isn't necessarily your nutritional plan, but it's like the emotional and psychosocial components.
Yeah, through the guise of eating and what we eat and how we move. And unfortunately, I will talk a little bit about Noom, but I don't really talk about marketing in this, but I'd love to answer your questions if I'm able to. I'm also not a clinician, so I don't have any kind of like clinical response to what you've shared. But what I can say is that in my time working with people with eating disorders or who've recovered from eating disorders, and in my work at the Calm Clinic, which is a Health at Every Size approach treatment center, we try really hard not to vilify any body sizes and look at health through other scopes and with other biomarkers, regardless of weight and BMI. So I'm a huge proponent of using other factors to determine someone's health beside their size, but again, that's coming from me who's not a clinician. But I appreciate the points that you brought up. Any
I
other?
think it's important to know that there's not a single study that shows causation between body weight and negative health outcomes. It's those things that you're saying that you do, but there may be correlative studies, but to my knowledge, there's not a single study that shows causation. And I think the challenge is, as we call it, obesogenic. So if we're showing pictures of people who are not thin, to me that's just like showing pictures of people who are short when society wants us to be tall. Like I think you probably would believe that someone can be naturally thin and eat whatever they want, but you wouldn't believe the reverse.
I wasn't necessarily linking belief, I was linking.
But I guess
like-
you're saying like marketing, I think if you're just seeing images, that's not promoting obesogenics. So like, that's not like saying it's great to be fat, right? I don't think our society says that anywhere.
I hear what you're saying.
Do you know what I mean? No, I'm curious because there is such an equation with health, with size. I mean, is that something that I think the Calm Clinic teaches?
I mean, certainly size can be, you can have a large size and have excellent biomarkers, right, is what you're saying, right? I agree with that.
Yeah.
You can be large and be super healthy, right? And definitely that's a positive thing, but clinically, I think clinically leaking, there are studies that directly link obesogenic behaviors with clinical outcomes that are not positive, right? right? And so that is what I was pointing at in terms of what is being advertised more now, right? Because we went the other direction. I think we went like, right, from the Twiggy models being thin to, I don't even know what you would call it, right? Like accepting all, which is what we want as a culture, right? You want everybody to accept everybody, and we want everybody to know that there are tools available for everybody. We want that to be inclusive. But clinically speaking, there are studies that definitely link obesogenic behaviors to higher BMI and heart disease and so on and so forth. And right now, that is the highest causation of death in America. Right? So I want to raise a child who has a healthy nutritional culture, but not like restrictive culture. Right? That's what I would like for my child. I think that would be, on average, one of the best. So also, kind of interesting is that with most insurances in Vermont, our children, like younger people, can get 3 dietetic consultations per year. Is that right?
I'm actually not sure about that, about insurance policies.
I've always used to try to link my kids to access to those tools, because first they didn't eat, right, when they were young. You put everything in one plate, and so they could choose what was healthy, and then maybe they would eat a lot of one thing. And so anyway, it's pretty cool. So our insurance covers access to those consultations. Yeah.
So just before we pivot away from this definition of diet culture, I want to acknowledge a couple of things. That, you know, a person's size and health is completely individual. It's not something that I would recommend. I would recommend that be between you and your clinician. I also want to echo that correlation doesn't equal causation, which I think you mentioned, which is something that Chrissy Harrison also says a lot about higher body weight and negative health outcomes. I have not read every study. I wouldn't claim to. I'm also, again, not a clinician. So I just want to say that what I'm coming from is just an educational standpoint about diet culture, knowing that everybody has an individualized relationship with food in their body. Dietetic consultation is an amazing tool if the dietitian in question is not promoting disordered eating. I have recommendations on who to see in Vermont for sure. And I believe that, you know, a person's relationship with food is deeply personal, and the relationship with their body is also deeply personal. So I would just encourage curiosity and a critical eye when it comes to media and how it portrays different styles of eating. So, move on. It's all connected. I didn't need to make this slide, but I did because it's a pretty little circle. Diet culture impacts your body image. Body image can impact diet culture. Diet culture didn't come out of nowhere. It was created by people who wanted to make money off of people hating themselves. Diet culture impacts disordered eating, and vice versa. People who created diet culture probably had some pretty disordered beliefs. I don't know, I wasn't like there when it came about a million years ago. People have been thinking about this a long time. I would highly recommend the book Fearing the Black Body by Dr. Sabrina Strings. It places a lot of the roots in fat phobia and in diet culture and the hatred of black bodies historically, which is alarming and fascinating and full of research. So if you're a nerd about this kind of thing, you want to geek on the research, 10 out of 10 would recommend. And disordered eating impacts body image, which I think we've already pretty well covered. These things are inextricably linked. I don't think you can take them out of context. Whether you have an eating disorder or not, diet culture promotes disordered eating behaviors and asking people to lose weight in a way that is not natural, in a way that is not a best fit for their body, which negatively impacts your body image. Deeply entrenched within one another, all the time, forever. You might be wondering, what is the difference between disordered eating, an eating disorder, and dieting? Handy 3 chart for you. Dieting is intentionally changing how you eat to meet a specific goal. It may start with a quote-unquote simple goal of I just want to drop a few pounds. What could the harm be? And dieting is a predictor for disordered eating. Disordered eating is like that messy middle spot between dieting and an eating disorder. It's a disordered or unhealthy relationship with food and eating. It's usually using eating disorder behaviors infrequently or not often enough to warrant a diagnosis. And often, if you look at a lot of diets, you think of Weight Watchers or whatever they're called, WW, with their stoplight system for children, or Noom, which again is not a diet, it's a lifestyle according to them, or Atkins. I can really only think of those three right now. You can probably think of more. It's restriction, it's elimination, it's limiting things. Even Whole30, which in theory is this great thing, is an elimination restrictive diet. Those are eating disorder behaviors, disordered eating behaviors. Even if they don't progress to an eating disorder, it's still disordered. And then at the far end of the extreme, an eating disorder is a clinically diagnosed disorder, as we've covered. It's an extreme form of disordered eating, an extreme form of dieting, and it's a mental health condition again. I just want to hit that one home. It's a mental health condition that looks like dieting, looks like disordered eating, but to that extreme degree. So I showed you 3 really unhealthy ways to eat. What is the goal? Hey, it's healthy eating. Healthy eating, I'm going to preface this by saying, like I mentioned earlier, your relationship with food, your relationship with your body, your health, that is also deeply personal. So what I list up here might not ring true to you, and that's okay. Healthy eating is totally different for every single person in this room because we're all different. We all have different needs. You've probably heard the old adage that if you put 20 people in a room and you had them eat the same thing for 20 years, they'd still all look different. That's true. That's because healthy eating looks different for every single person. Healthy eating, and this is the way I've defined it kind of in my own understanding, in the research that I've read, in the literature, the podcasts, in my work with intuitive eating people, my clients in intuitive eating counseling, in my work at the Comm Center. Intuitive eating is based on your body's hunger and fullness signals. I want to acknowledge, though, that if you have an eating disorder, if you have a history of an eating disorder, those signals may not ever come back. And that's really damaging. So while I am a huge proponent of intuitive eating, I recognize that it's not possible for everyone. Someone with anorexia may never redevelop that hunger signal, so they can't rely on it. Someone with binge eating disorder may never redevelop that fullness signal, so they can't rely on it. So there will have to be some sort of mechanical aspect of their eating as a result of recovering from an eating disorder. Which, hey, I would fully endorse mechanical eating over an eating disorder any day, even if it means that you don't have those signals to be more interoceptively aware. Healthy eating is eating a variety of foods with a mix of healthy and fun foods based on your preferences and your needs. I'm a huge fan of the All Foods Fit model. I truly believe it. I've seen it work wonders for people who really thought they could never, ever, ever eat a cupcake. And then they're like, oh my God, it's because I've been avoiding cupcakes. That's why I binged on them. And they're like, oh my God, if I'm allowed to have a cupcake and remind myself that there will be cupcakes in the future, then maybe I won't binge on them again. That's a huge thing that I work with clients about is like, well, if I'm really listening to my hunger and I really want a quote unquote fun food, I'll use cupcakes again, then I'll just eat cupcakes all day. And I say, okay, then eat cupcakes all day. If you eat cupcakes all day for one day, it's not gonna impact your health long term. I'd be willing to bet that tomorrow you're gonna wake up and be like, I never wanna see another cupcake in my life. And you'll crave something else. Your body craves variety. That's the gentle nutrition aspect of intuitive eating. Your body craves that variety. It craves different nutrients. It craves different things to make it function optimally. And that's kind of where we talk about like the body food choice congruence. You might really crave cheese, but it might really make you sit in the bathroom for a long time. So maybe you don't eat so much cheese. I don't know, that's just an example. I love garlic. Makes me real gassy, so I'm not gonna eat it all the time, even though I want it all the time. So that's body food choice congruence. You might really want it, but you know it doesn't have the best effect on your body. And that's okay too, and that's not coming from a disordered standpoint. That's coming from, I know my body, and I know how this is gonna impact me. Meals and snacks are just another part of your day that don't cause distress. So for someone who is eating in a healthy way, your whole world doesn't need to revolve around food. It can if that's something that you really love, or if cooking and connecting with people over food is a huge value to you. It can absolutely be something that you think a lot about, but it's not causing you distress if you're eating in a healthy way. Food can also be a source of joy, connection, cultural celebration, anything positive and not just a sense of overwhelm. A lot of people who have a really strong cultural link to foods. So people in the Jewish community, people in the Latinx community, people with African roots have deep cultural connections to food. And if they have an eating disorder, that connection can be disrupted immediately. But if you heal your relationship with food, that connection can start to become something where you're actually connecting with people around you and able to enjoy the food and able to actually have that bring joy and value back into your life as a result of your culture, which is beautiful, as opposed to something that you're just obsessed about. Any questions about this? Healthy body image is also incredibly subjective. I think back to that double arrow spectrum. I also have no idea what time it is. I feel like I've been blabbing for 900 years.
It's just 8:01.
Oh God, oh no!
No, it's 7:01.
Oh.
Oh.
I'm scared. I was like, I'm halfway done. That's perfect. That would have been horrible. I would have just been like, hey, here are all my slides. I'll email them to you. Healthy body image is also subjective. It means honoring your body as it is and respecting its size, shape, and ability without having to change it. That's the caveat that I always mean to add to this slide, and I never do. But it's honoring all these things about your body without having in the back of your mind, but it'd be so much better if I lost 10 pounds. Or it'd be so much better if I could run a marathon. Or it'd be so much better if I ate a vegan diet. But healthy body image is just accepting all of it as it is. Developing healthy body image can also prevent disordered eating. So earlier I said that dieting is a predictive factor for eating disorders. The opposite is true. If you have healthy body image, or if you're raised to have more of an appreciation or a healthy view of your body, you're less likely to develop an eating disorder. It's a protective factor in that way, which is so cool. There's so few things that we can say are protective factors against eating disorders, and this is kind of like, again, vague and nebulous and subjective, but it's exciting to know that, trying to rekindle a healthy relationship with your body can actually have really good impacts. Some tips to improve body image, because I don't know anyone at all who has a perfectly harmonious relationship with their body 100% of the time. I certainly don't. These are some of the things that I do, just personally, that help me. Focus on the pros of your body as it is. Not thinking like, oh, but if I were to work out 5 times a week, every week, I'd really love my body. Instead, think, oh my God, my body is just like, it's doing its thing, it's letting me go to work, it's letting me talk to my friends, it's letting me interact with my husband, great, love that. Feeding yourself regardless of how you feel about your body, it's probably the hardest thing to do. If I'm having a bad body image day, I can sneakily find ways to think, I don't really need to have lunch just yet, I can wait another hour. Or maybe I don't need to go to that party because, I don't know, I'm not really feeling it because of how I feel about my body. And I'd be avoiding a meal in that way. Feed yourself regardless. You're not going to feel any better about yourself if you don't eat. Avoid comparing yourself to others. That feels ridiculous to say out loud because we all compare ourselves to others. It's just what we do, especially on social media, which I'll get to shortly. Reach out for support, whether it's to a therapist, a doctor, a friend, a partner, a dog, really good listener. Dogs are great listeners. Sometimes just saying it out loud, even if it's not someone who can verbalize anything back, it's great. I think my cat has heard more about how I'm feeling than anyone else. And diversify your feed. Change up who you follow on social media. I'm really going to talk about that a lot. But I just want to acknowledge that this is really hard. It's really hard, especially when we're grown up in a culture that trains us to want to shrink and always be changing and always be stronger and always be healthier and always be this and always be that. It's really hard to just be like, no, I'm actually okay, and feel that security in yourself. It's tough. Oh boy, social media's role. Social media is everyone's highlight reel. We all know this, right? No one's posting the unflattering picture. No one's posting when their dog pooped on a walk and they forgot to bring a bag. No one's posting when they're having a really bad day and having it be just raw. Maybe they are. I think that's changing a little bit. But social media is everyone's highlight reel. Everything is curated and edited and handpicked to show this image that people are trying to sell, whether they're an influencer or not. This format really promotes self-comparison. Because whether you want to or not, I'd be willing to bet that when you're scrolling and you see someone's post, whether it's a celebrity or a friend, you'd be like, oh my God, they went camping at that campsite. I've always wanted to go there and I've never been able to make it work. What does it say about me as a mom? Comparison immediately. People can come across as experts without credentials. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. There's a lot of people saying that they know a lot about a lot with no credential. And it's really scary. People can lie really easily on social media. There's no clarity, there's no nuance. And I'm specifically with that thinking about those What I Eat in a Day videos. There's no preface of, this is what I eat in a day as guided by my dietitian, or this is what I eat in a day as someone in recovery from an eating disorder, although some people do say that. This is what I eat in a day, but for the rest of the week I'm not eating anything. Like, they're not really giving you the whole picture. Not just with those videos, with anything else. Why is it so hard to call out? That's a rhetorical question. Diet culture is why. So I want to go through some quick tips on how to spot diet culture on social media. There's 4 that I'll go through with a bunch of examples. I tried to fuzz out pictures and names for anonymity. You can kind of tell. I hope you won't rat on me, but some examples. Check their credentials. What are they selling something? Proceed with caution with those What I Eat in a Day videos, and do they promise weight loss? So let's just look at a few of these. First, check their credentials. God, that red is awful. I'm so sorry. It's so hard to read. Okay. First, nutritionists. Nutritionists face fewer regulations in order to become certified than dietitians. That should be a period, not a comma. I knew I'd find a typo. They don't have to go through as many certifications, as many exams, as many credentialing hoops to jump through, so to speak, to be certified as dietitians do. So also, anyone can go on social media and say they're a nutritionist without any other credential, without having to go to school, without having to do any training. I could go on right now and say, I'm Corey Bourne, nutritionist. You should all eat Cocoa Puffs every day, and someone would probably listen if you're really bad. Anyone can say they're a nutritionist, proceed with caution. Health biohacker. Oh, a diet culture red flag, right there. You cannot hack your biology. There's no hack. You are not a machine or a computer. This usually means restricting in some way. If you're doing a health biohack, you're restricting, you're taking overpriced supplements, I don't know, to me that makes me think of the Terminator. I don't like it, your reaction to diet. Yeah, it doesn't make me feel good. Biohack is a huge red flag to me. This is someone that I found, I'll just say his last name was Live Good. I don't know if that's real. He lists himself as Dr. Live Good, but it just says doctor, and I looked on his links, I looked on his website, I looked through a bunch of his posts. There were no credentials. Doctor of what? I have no idea. Doctor of delusion, perhaps. I don't know. What qualifies you to tell me what to eat is immediately what I thought. What qualifies you to have a highlight reel on your page of healthy foods? Where did you learn to define those things as healthy? You promote healthy living through recipes and meal plans not backed by an appropriate license. Again, doctor of what? I have no clue who this person is. But when I looked up healthy eating, was the tag I looked up on Instagram to find this account. I was like, why should I trust you? But the alarming thing is, look how many followers this guy has. People are trusting him. Really shocking. Are they selling something? Yeah. Goop is definitely selling something, 100% of the time. I was really drawn to their bio. Good, clean food. That immediately made me think, oh, well, everything else is dirty and bad. But if I'm eating there, I'm good, I'm clean, I'm morally better than someone else. And then that prompted me down this whole rabbit hole in my brain of, okay, well, what are they selling? What do they have? What's so good about it? How can I make that? Where can I find that? I'm not going to go to this place. Costa Mesa, no way. How am I going to eat good so I can be good? They're selling something. They're selling their brand, the Goop brand. And they're also selling that morality piece. That's really linked to diet culture. Oh God, rubbed me the wrong way. Are they selling something? Noom is definitely selling something too. Noom is a diet hiding behind intuitive eating lingo. I want to call that out. They claim that they're so different. In some ways they are. However, Noom is still selling a diet. This user is promoting Noom they have pictures of and videos of a bunch of different meals, saying like, this is what I ate this week on the Noom diet, or this is what I ate after working with my nutritionist with Noom, which again, nutritionist was a red flag to me. They don't give any specific details about the recommendations or why they're recommended to eat that. Again, the nuance of clarity is lacking, and this person is trying to sell Noom. They're trying to get other people to use Noom. Also, the subtext is eat all this and still lose weight, which is kind of Noom's whole thing. I think you can probably tell I don't like Noom. That's a personal choice. Because they co-opt intuitive eating lingo and turn it into a diet. Intuitive eating does not guarantee weight loss, but they're saying it does in a lot of ways. It implies also that weight loss is good and should be everyone's goal, which, as we discussed earlier, it's not possible for a lot of people.
Don't they sell semaglutide now too?
Yeah.
You can do like new with shots.
They sure do. Indeed.
I've never heard of it. Has anyone else heard of Noom? Where have I been? Never even heard of it.
God, you're so safe.
You must have a really good Instagram.
Yeah, curious.
It's good.
It's
Yeah.
probably cats and gardening. That's pretty much it.
No, you
but-
Not bad.
have good recipes on it.
Exactly.
Also
That's
good.
a recipe. How is Noom not found me?
No.
I'm gonna have to call them tonight.
They'll find you.
Oh,
Yeah, they're listening.
So apparently part of their algorithm is what size clothes you purchase.
Heavens.
At other sites, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
That's
you know when you
troubling.
start talking about something and there's an ad for it in your
Yeah, yeah.
It's the same thing, you order something, like, whatever.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and you get a new mat if you order the wrong size.
Yeah, that's shocking and not altogether surprising. So what I eat in a day videos, has anyone ever seen one of these? Were you looking for it or did it just show up? Because usually when I'm on TikTok, which is rare, it's when I just need to like have a moment to unwind and I just scroll mindlessly. I always see at least like 3 of these and I'm not like liking them, I'm not searching for them. I don't want this, they just show up. These are not celebrities, these are just people. I guess celebrities are people too, but like these are not like famous people posting what I eat in a day. First of all, what I eat in a day, 40 pounds down. What I eat in a day, 40 pounds down in 5 months. They're guaranteeing weight loss with this. The implicit goal is weight loss with this creator's daily intake. And it doesn't take into consideration that this creator has totally different needs than anyone else. It's a different person. Might have worked for them. I'd be willing to bet that what they eat in a day in this video is not true to how they eat daily. If they're down that amount of weight in 5 months, I'd be willing to bet that there's a lot of disordered eating. Quite frankly, I started watching the video and I got upset, so I stopped. This doesn't include any context for why this person is eating this way. What was the goal? How are they feeling about themselves? How has it impacted the rest of their life? And then on the right, I thought this one was interesting. The entire video was like, this is obviously just a screen grab, and the caption, I start with supplements. Great. Aesthetics over intake. People making what I eat in a day videos can often try to post really pretty, aesthetic, gorgeous, like vibrant smoothies and like these rich grain bowls, which like honestly both sound really good to me right now. My mouth did water, but they're only showing those things because they look really pretty. And you know, the priority is making it look good and not necessarily an understanding that, hey, maybe all my needs aren't being met, or maybe this isn't actually good for me, or like, what if I can't have these supplements? What if they cost $50 a month and I can't afford that? Does that mean I'm not able to eat like this person and have it be pretty too? It just leads to a lot of spiraling thinking about like, why can't I eat like that? That's like the #1 question I get in my head when I see these videos, why can't I eat like that? Because I'm busy, because it's expensive, because it's not a priority of mine. There's lots of reasons, but people posting these videos, and then specifically celebrities who are posting what I eat in a day videos, are not taking into consideration that's not possible for everyone to do that, nor should it be. I mean, people have different needs. I think that's really like the biggest thing lacking from all this is the nuance that everyone needs different things. Do they promise weight loss? We already kind of mentioned that in the last one, but the subtext of this, lose 10 pounds in 6 weeks grocery list. So subtext, shop like me and you'll lose weight. And don't you want that? Which is also the subtext. Promising fat loss in the caption, how a grocery shop for fat loss, which you can't target fat loss. It's not possible. You can lose overall mass, but you can't specifically target fat loss. And it also doesn't consider, again, other body's nutritional needs. Like someone could eat like that and maybe they'll gain 10 pounds in 6 weeks, who knows? It just depends on the person. Feels like hokey to promote fat loss when that's not even something that's possible. Oh, good, we're switching to the good ones. So those are some bad things to look out for on social media. Here's some really good accounts to follow on Instagram. I won't be mad if you get your phone out and follow them now. I highly recommend it. Chrissy Harrison, I sing her praises. She wrote Anti-Diet. She wrote The Wellness Trap, both incredible books, full of research and information. Yes, the phones. Take a picture or follow them now, I don't care. Project Heal is an amazing nonprofit. They post a lot of information about eating disorders, disordered eating, everything in this realm. I'm a huge fan of them. I interned for them a while back, and they do such amazing work helping people access care for eating disorders because, in Vermont, we live in a virtual treatment desert where there's no option. They offer grants to people to help them get treatment. They also help people with virtual meal support groups, which are great. If you can't access care, you can access a free meal support group, which is awesome. Jennifer Rollin is an amazing eating disorder therapist who posts a lot of educational content about eating disorders in everyday life, a lot of content for parents as well. Really, really helpful. And she's also really vulnerable, and she's also really funny. I don't know, that always helps me. If someone's funny, if they're too dry, I'm like, I'll read your stuff, but it'll be painful. She's amazing. So many more. No Food Rules, Colleen Christensen. She is incredible. She pokes fun at diet culture all the time. You will not regret scrolling through her reels. I could watch them forever. She is really a big proponent of understanding that healthy is different for everyone. She pokes fun at almond moms, which makes me giggle as someone who grew up with an almond mom. Also kind of hurts, but
Wait, clarify what that is.
Oh, has anyone ever heard that term, almond mom?
Yeah, my kids call me that.
They do. Oh my God. Okay.
That and they say we live in an ingredient house.
Hey, I grew up in an ingredient house and it made me stronger. So I'll define both of them. An almond mom is,
I buy good snacks.
which so subjective. And I'll talk to them if you want me to. Almond moms are super vilified and unfairly in this case especially, but often unfairly vilifying moms who buy healthy foods. It can be.
Wait, those shakes you make, what do they call it? I don't know. Joss always, she makes the
She loves
best.
our smoothies.
Yes,
Amazing.
loves.
She seeds in the smoothies.
There you go, that's
I'm
what
an
she
almond
is.
mom.
Almond mom can be really lighthearted, but it's also sometimes people talk about their almond mom and it's talking about how their mom raised them to have an eating disorder,
Yeah.
which not the case, very different. It's raising them to believe that dieting and shrinking yourself is the goal, kind of like that. I love starting my day with just 8 almonds and then I eat at lunchtime. That mentality is being an almond mom.
I don't see you as that.
Well, no, and that's not what they mean when
Okay.
they say that. They mean I don't buy good unhealthy snacks.
Yeah.
Well, I think the difference is almond mom, good version is, you create smoothies and you think about what nutrients you're
Right.
adding and you eat the rainbow. But I think the negative part of it is your kid wants a Dorito. I can always tell, I used to be able to tell kids who didn't get certain foods at home because they would come to our house and
Oh, yeah.
I'd be like, oh my God, don't eat that. I bought that 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Kids don't care. It's always just sitting there.
Yeah.
But they would take down every snack in the house.
Yeah.
Because, so it's like a no as opposed to a yes.
Yeah.
It's the negative.
Yeah, that's the negative aspect. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. And then an ingredient household, near and dear to my heart. No snacks, no packaged foods, all ingredients. So an ingredient household meal, my favorite, a tortilla with butter and cinnamon sugar, and you roll it up and you eat it. Because there were no snacks. Or like a handful of shredded cheese is an ingredient household snack. So like they're not buying like little chip bags or like granola bars or like cereal or, you know, like snacky things that are packaged to be kids' snacks. They're not buying those. They just have ingredients to make like a meal or like a full thing. That makes me laugh because I look back at living in an ingredient household with fondness. I don't regret it in any way, but it's funny listening to like kids talk about it. It's such a funny thing that is a thing.
And by the way, I do buy the ingredients because I love to bake.
Yes.
So there's always good stuff to eat.
Amazing. Yeah, no doubt in my mind. That's incredible. Okay, so some more recommendations. Colleen Christensen is incredible. Colleen Reichman, double Colleen. Colleen Reichman is another incredible eating disorder therapist. She wrote a book with Jennifer Rawlinson, The Inside Scoop About Eating Disorders. Really good. They both have their own lived experience with an eating disorder and treat people so effectively because of it. She also posts a meme roundup on Mondays and Fridays, and they're all really funny and not related to eating disorders. They're just funny. So I'd really recommend if you need a little bit of humor at the start or end of your week. Find Food Freedom. Sam is so great. She's a registered dietitian who is just calling BS on so many diet culture things and calling out things that people have normalized in how we view food. And she's backing it up with evidence. She's incredibly educational. She's incredibly personable. And she, like it says, help you make peace with food and body. And that's like what all the content is geared toward. Elena Eford used to work for the Calm Clinic, and now she is in private practice as a dietitian. She makes amazing videos, again, calling out people who have diet culture beliefs or fat-phobic beliefs. And she makes really good evidence-backed videos to basically say, hey, you know, that comment was not only really mean, but it's also really wrong, and here's why. She calls out her trolls like no one else. She's incredible. The Body Positive is an amazing nonprofit that helps people just rekindle a positive relationship with their body through 5 competencies. They're based in California, but they do work all over the country. One of the founders, Connie Sobchak, wrote a book called Embody, which I would highly recommend. It's on the resource list that's back there as well. Anti-Diet Right Club is a nonprofit that is anti-diet culture and anti-fat phobia and just promoting resources to help people combat those things in their everyday life and find community without feeling the need to change themselves. I think there's one more. Nope, that's it. Wow. There's a whole bunch more in that packet back there, so please help yourself. So with all of this, you might be feeling like, oh my God, diet culture's everywhere. I don't know what to do. What do I say? I know a lot of people in the room are parents too, and that can feel incredibly charged. How do I talk to my kids? How do I not instill these diet-y beliefs? How do I help them feel empowered to make their own healthy choices healthy for them? So I've got a very minimal, hopefully handy list of what to say, and then also equally helpful what not to say. So some language to use, some language to avoid. So I always recommend keeping it body neutral. That snack looks great, love those too, whatever it is. Your rolled up tortilla with cinnamon sugar, love that snack. Whatever. Instead of saying, oh, that snack is gonna make you gain a little bit of weight, should you wanna pick that? Or, oh yeah, that's a great snack, that'll help you keep, like, stay on track, or whatever it is. Also, great job at the track meet. I can tell you've been training hard. What a contrived example, I'm so sorry, but celebrating what a body can do without expecting a change, or without saying, oh, it's because you're so skinny, oh my God, you worked so hard, you lost all that weight, and then you just won. Great job. Instead of that, just acknowledge their hard work is fine. Shift away from harmful conversations, just change the subject. That can be something incredibly helpful to do. Why don't we talk about our weekend plans instead? If you hear someone going down the rabbit hole of diet culture, this is kind of like the last sticking point in my own recovery from diet culture, is calling people out. It's really hard to do when it's so normalized. So I love changing the subject. Has anyone seen that movie? Wasn't it great? That can get messy because then people talk about bodies in the movies. I don't know. Change the topic. Talk about literally anything else. that isn't gonna make people, focus and obsess about their food and body relationship. What not to say. Harmful or moralizing comments about yourself or others. These were easy to write because I hear them all the time. Ugh, I was so bad last night. I had 2 servings of dessert after dinner. It's bad. You're so small and perfect. I wish I looked like you. Potentially triggering comments. This juice cleanse is the only way I can drop weight before my class reunion. Did you see how much they ate at the dinner party last night? They have no self-control. These are things that I have thought. These are things I might have said, not recently, way back. These are things that I hear people saying with good intentions. These are also things that I hear people saying with young kids in the room who you might not think are listening, but they're always listening. I always thought that my students when I taught middle school weren't listening, but they always heard everything. They're always listening. I don't know how they do that. So just be hyper vigilant of really, specifically anything moralizing that might not seem bad. It might seem like well-intentioned, or anything that can really, promote dieting, promote weight loss in an unhealthy way. Any questions?
Do you work with the schools here? Does Plum Clinic work with the schools here at all?
Ish. I do some presentations and health classes. I do some workshops with small groups. Yeah.
Do you have a recommendation for, I know like one of my sons is in 10th grade and he's in a, what do they call it, personal wellness or
Mhm.
something. He's required to track everything he eats on a tracker, and I haven't been anorexic. I just know if there's anybody in that class that has, an eating disorder, that's
Yeah.
really,
Harmful.
yeah. And it's part of the class. So what's your suggestion? Like, is there someone who's in charge of the curriculum who, how do we get them to get you guys in there?
Yeah, I will say that I've had conversations like that ad nauseum with curriculum developers, and it's really hard, specifically in health classes. Which again, these things that are, I think really come from good intentions
Yes.
without understanding the really negative impact it can have, and maybe not even for someone who already has an eating disorder or struggles with their intake in any way, could really lead to that, because then they have in their mind, oh, I need to be thinking about what I'm eating, I need to be writing it down, I need to be tracking, I need to be counting. That can start that pattern. I would recommend curriculum developer, department chair, principal.
Okay.
If that's not effective, I'm not above taking it to the superintendent. I think it's really important. If you want to use scare tactics, you can say that eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate of any mental health illness, second only to opioid use. And if you're requiring students to count things and promoting something that could become, not saying it always will, of course, but could become disordered, that's dangerous and that's potentially life-threatening and it's serious. So I'd recommend that. I'm also happy to help brainstorm ways to talk about that.
Because I don't want them to throw the baby out with the bath.
Surely not, because of
Really
course there's useful information.
Important to learn and understand about nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, that nuance, I feel like I've said that word 5 million times tonight, but it's so crucial. It's possible though, and again, I'd be really happy to help if you'd like.
So even through a lot on the internet, how would you help teenagers to avoid that? Because they're all over the internet, right?
Yeah.
Phones, often to various sites. How do you avoid those pitfalls, or how would you help advise them not to avoid those pitfalls?
Yeah, I think that telling a teenager to avoid anything is really hard. I'm not a parent, so I can't really speak to the full truth of that statement, but telling a teenager not to do something, they're gonna go do it right away. I do know that if this is something that they're mindful of and you want to have an informed conversation with them about, there are settings in all social media apps where you can limit certain content. So there are ways to limit what naturally pops up in a person's algorithm on social media. That's an option. It's really annoying to do because, of course, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, they don't want you to limit anything. They want you to see everything that they want you to see, but it is possible. Also recommend blocking accounts the second something triggering comes up, reporting accounts that are posting triggering or disordered eating content, and also just really encouraging them to talk about it. They're gonna see a million things that you won't know, which is scary. But if they feel comfortable to say, hey, I saw this video, it was a what I eat in a day video, can I try that? Then you can have an informed conversation about why do you want to try that? What are you hoping to get from that? And really kind of trying to understand where they're coming from and what they're saying and how it's impacting them. That can maybe help them make more of an informed choice and have a little bit more agency in kind of curating their feed a little bit more. And I think also, you know, by following more accounts that are promoting healthy eating or promoting recovery, promoting anything anti-diet culture, I really think that that will shift their algorithm as well. So if they'd be open to, you know, following a few accounts that like maybe they don't currently have any interest in, maybe they could change things in their algorithm in other ways. Long story short, there's no easy way unless you take their phone from them and change all their settings. Good luck. Yeah.
It is hard, but I think a lot of it also starts at home. What are your habits at home? Do you eat together as a family? Do you, like for me, first thing in the morning, what are we having for dinner tonight? Like, what are the conversations like? And I think we're all so busy running off in different directions that some families don't have that time together. And I think that it sort of just sends an important message, like food is okay, like this is about connecting, this is about talking about our day, and I don't know, I think a lot of that is missing, you know, because we're all so busy.
Absolutely. I think prioritizing family mealtime is so important.
Definitely.
And something that is really an important component of care for eating disorders is a family element. We talked about this so briefly. It is an element, it's not like the be-all end-all of eating disorder treatment, but it's an element that we use at the Comm Center for sure. If we have an adolescent patient coming in, their family is gonna come to therapy with them regularly. They're gonna go to nutritional counseling appointments regularly because educating the family is super important, especially if they're not in a residential care center, right? If they're not inpatient and they're going back to potentially a really triggering environment, we have to educate the whole environment, right? So you speak to such a good point. It really is like environmentally, like the family is really important to help people feel comfortable too, and then also help them feel comfortable being vulnerable if they're starting to feel some of these disordered things.
Yeah.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could speak to the trends in Vermont in terms of like age and demographic of individuals who are having an increase in disordered eating behaviors. And my second question is, do you have any evidence or information that you could point us to, and maybe it's in the resources, in terms of the quality of food that might be impacting diet culture?
So I'm going to answer your questions in the opposite order you asked them. I don't have resources about food quality, but that's something I'd be happy to look into, especially like reach out to the team at the Comm Center and see if they do, and I'd be happy to share that with you. In terms of like where we're seeing a rise in need for eating disorder care in Vermont, that's hard for me to gauge because as I was kind of like briefly talking about before this started, it's really hard to connect with providers about this topic. And there's such a shortage of providers specializing in eating disorders or even willing to touch that topic with a 10-foot pole. So gathering the data is really hard. I do know that since I started working at the Comm Center a year ago, the biggest number of people that need care are adolescents, 12 to 15. The most common age of onset of an eating disorder is 12 to 25, so it's not like really that surprising. That's where the biggest need is, and unfortunately we only treat 16 up, so then what do we do, you know? So
You only treat 16 and up at the Comm Center?
Yeah.
Why?
because it's so many reasons.
Okay.
It would require a different specialized care
Gotcha.
team. When we opened with the Green Mountain Care Board, it was under these certain
Okay.
parameters. It's horrible, and I don't agree. And we're all very hyper aware that we need an adolescent program, and it's just making that happen is so many steps that we can't tackle yet. So the adolescent age is very common, and I will say that demographically who we see coming to treatment or inquiring about treatment is all over the place. So it's kind of interesting how, you know, we'll have someone reach out and say, hey, I have a 9-year-old who's struggling with what I think is ARFID, can you help? And while we can't, we can point them in the right direction and get them the support that they need. But then we'll have someone, in their late 70s say, hey, I've struggled with this all my life, what do I do? And everywhere in between. So it really is all over. Also all over gender-wise, all over diagnosis-wise. Also, I think worth mentioning all over in terms of like people who have gotten care in the past versus who haven't, whether it's for an eating disorder or another mental health issue that they have. We get all types, truly, yeah.
One thing that I don't know if it still exists, and so I'll just say out loud, and you might have some insight. But when I was interested in having my kids see nutritionists, and it started with my son who was like lactose intolerant. We weren't sure if he had other intolerances, but they offer them a cooking class as one of their 3 dietitian consultations. I don't know if that's still available, but that was, I want to say it was somewhere close to Dorset Street, where they could go and learn to cook for wellness.
That's incredible. I have a guess as to a few different groups that could be, but I'm not sure, so I don't want to misspeak. But I love that that's an element of it, because I think, learning to cook and approach food confidently is such a huge part of, yes, it's fun. And it's also a group that we have at the Comm Center, which is amazing, teaching them kitchen skills and cooking, which is, oftentimes if you have a restrictive eating disorder, you're like, I will be anywhere but the kitchen, so I don't know how to wield a knife safely. So teaching them how to do that, or teaching them how to bake or cook simple recipes that meet all of their meal plan requirements. That can be just as helpful for someone with an eating disorder as it is for someone without one. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's really valuable. I'm glad to hear that was an option, and I hope it still is.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. It's great. Okay. Any other questions
In
before?
terms of treatment, I think Hannah's House is a really great resource for younger people, because I think calling them eating disorders is sort of like calling climate change global warming. Like, it doesn't have a lot to do with eating sometimes. That's what we see.
Yeah.
But like you said in the beginning, it really is so much about mental health. And so a lot of times the people who need the help the most don't get it because they don't eat like they have an eating disorder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that Hannah's House is a resource that we use in terms of coordinating care for people who need support holistically with mental health, or who are looking for any other kinds of support. An amazing resource. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to work so badly with Hannah's House if it weren't for that. And I think, the networking aspect of it is so important in Vermont, where it's this big and everyone knows everyone. Chances are someone knows someone that can get some of the care that they need, whether they're willing to approach the eating disorder or if it's more of a mental health approach. And I will say, oftentimes we do refer to other places, and it turns out it really depends what the primary focus is or what the primary area of concern is, right? Because almost always someone with an eating disorder has another co-occurring condition. So if that's depression and that is more acute than their eating disorder, then we'll refer them to somewhere where they're getting care for that. If it's anxiety, the same thing. If it's trauma, or if it's substance use, if it's, it could be anything. If they're having that at the same time as an eating disorder, we're going to make sure that they're getting care for both. So Hannah's House is definitely, just in terms of sourcing supports for people, is, an organization that we really value. Thank you for highlighting that.
And it's a slippery slope, because when you're working with the kids that are anxious, that don't want to eat before an event, right? Or and then where are you going to get the energy to bike 10 miles? Where are you, but that's a whole separate, I don't think it's leading down to, well, at least I'm speaking for myself, but it's a slippery slope.
Mm-hmm. It really is.
Right? If I can function without eating and still win that race, and it's what? Talk about just a mixed message, or you're like a car, you'll run out of gas.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But if that's being reinforced, then that's where it can really go downhill.
Really, it can. Yeah, it is such a slippery slope. I'm glad you brought that up. Which is why talking about it and having resources is so important. A little bit about building body image resilience. I won't take too much time here. Maybe I will if you need me to. Take what you see online with a grain of salt. I hope I was forceful with that. Tune into your intuition. I'm a huge proponent of this as an intuitive eating counselor and someone who had intuitive eating help me recover from an eating disorder, but also with the acknowledgement that that's not possible for everyone. So to the extent possible, tune into your intuition. And that also goes for social media or whatever you're seeing or conversations you're hearing. If your gut says this doesn't feel right, listen. Reach out and connect. We can't do this alone. We can't do anything alone. And eating disorders thrive in isolation. Shame thrives in isolation. Reach out, talk to people. I highly recommend anyone who you feel safe connecting with. Be mindful of your self-talk. Don't shame yourself about your self-talk. Just be aware of it. Listen to it. It's probably trying to tell you something beyond what it's actually saying. And develop a realistic self-care routine. And when I say that, I don't just mean bubble baths and face masks. I mean doing the laundry and taking care of the house or whatever it is. Routine, meaning caring for yourself in your habits and things that will make your life happen, and also check in and make sure you feel safe and held on your own. Can help you feel resilient to all the nonsense you'll see online or that you might hear from other people. And we're here to support you too. I'm not going to do a whole spiel because I don't think anyone needs that, but if you do, I'm happy to give you more information about the Comm Center. And just, really our mission is to help people recover. We know that not everyone can make it to Burlington for programming. We know that 16 up is a limiting factor, but we're really passionate about helping people find care even if they can't find it with us. So we're always willing to provide alternatives if people can't see us for care. Oh, and there's our team. 3 therapists, 2 dietitians, a nurse practitioner, 3 mental health techs, and an office manager. Ta-da!
Where are you on there?
Oh, I'm right down there, hiding.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah. And here are some resources. They're all printed on the table, but if you want to scan the QR codes, you can have them virtually and share them with others if you want. No pressure, but there's that. And I'll take any questions if you have them while you do that. I should open them in a separate tab each time you scan. They're all just Google Docs, and if you have any issue with them, just let me know. I can email them to you too. The first one is just a really comprehensive list of all kinds of books, podcasts, social media accounts to follow. The books are broken down into categories for the person who's struggling, for the family of the person who's struggling. A really good mix of things. Podcasts, I just want to highlight again, Food Psych is an amazing podcast. Maintenance Phase is a great podcast that takes more of a humorous approach to some of these topics. Particularly their episode about the food pyramid is hilarious and infuriating in equal measure. The Eating Disorder and Anti-Diet Dietitians and Support, that's the Vermont-based one. Unfortunately, they're largely Burlington area based. To my knowledge, but I also included resources on how to find a therapist or an intuitive eating counselor near you or virtually, as well as some virtual eating disorder supports. And then the virtual eating disorder support groups and meal support is a whole list of a bunch of different specific support groups for anyone who's struggling. They're all virtual, they're all free, and they're by really credible organizations that I would highly recommend. Did everyone get what they needed from this slide? If you need it, I can go back to it. Just to say thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. There's our contact, there's Hannah's house contact. If you need anything, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. If there's a way I can support you in trying to make changes for your kids, for your family, whatever it is, I'm happy to support in any way. And I'll be here if you have any questions, but I'm not going to make you just sit there anymore. So.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
And we have food here, that would be your choice.